All right, men. You got dice?
Yeah!
You got books?
Uh-huh!
Well, bloody hell, let's do this thing.
Woohoo!
How's it going, everybody? This is Aaron the Pedantic. Today I wanted to talk about how my Old School Essentials public game is going. And just so you know, it's a public game, so that means that just pop on the Discord, get into the scheduling channel, and you too can join. From the way that I was going about it, the players have the opportunity to recount their story to the librarian who is chronicling the adventure, which is basically my way of saying, do you want this information that you've gathered what do you want to be public information? And this gives the players a way to conceal information, that they don't want other competing players to have, perhaps if they're trying to get through a dungeon, but it allows them to share as well. If they'd like to, they can share their exploits and things like that. So there's kind of an encouraged way, one way or the other. But so far, the players have been pretty willing to open up about things. So because of that, I get to talk about the game with a little bit more specifics than I would have otherwise. So, as the way that I'm doing this, the dungeons are living, breathing environments. If you kill something, it's gone. So if another group is going to go into the same dungeon you have already cleared the first level of, and I may be bringing up that specifically for a reason, the things that you killed are still dead. They're still dead. Something may have moved in, perhaps, if it makes sense. But depending on how you left the place, things will have changed a little bit, perhaps. But it will still be the same state, basically. So it is a living, breathing environment. And because of this, players that raid the dungeon after the last group went, they can get in further, but the things that were picked up are still gone. So it's kind of a nice ticking clock. But just for the sake of trying to explain what kind of stuff they're going through and how fun it has been to run this, I'm going to go into a good bit of detail. So the first group went through this place that I'm not going to say the name because the name kind of has some hints about it. But basically, it is a tomb that has a lot of snakes and has a lot of dead people. So obviously not giving away too much, but it's a ziggurat that's kind of carved into the side of a cliff. And there are three entrances, and one of them is accessible if the group were to spend the money or time to basically excavate a whole bunch of rubble. One of them is accessible if you're a halfling, you can just crawl through. And then one of them is accessible to basically everyone. So because of this, I had to pretty much, have the entire place mapped out from the beginning. Otherwise, there was the opportunity that they would get to a point where I'm not prepared for because it hasn't been filled in yet. But they went through the accessible entrance, which is predictable. But they didn't have to. But anyway, so that ends up taking them to the top floor of the dungeon. Now, one of the things that I'm loving about Old School Essentials, and this is something that anybody who's been running BX knows. So, preaching to the choir, perhaps. But there are so few mechanisms in between what the player is trying to describe for what their character is doing and how that is adjudicated, that most of the time, the game is played as a question and answer scenario. So I ask what you're doing, you tell me what you're doing, I ask you questions about how you're doing it, you ask me questions about what you're seeing, you say, I'm going to do this, then you kind of focus on a particular aspect and all that kind of stuff. So what this does is it takes away a lot of the randomness. And it puts the randomness exactly where it needs to be, which is when all else fails, basically. And it incredibly punishing at that point to a gleeful degree. So this is a game that it's going to feature a lot of PC deaths. Now, the first group was incredibly cautious, incredibly prepared, and incredibly lucky. So I'll give you an example. So the thief of the group was the first one to descend the stairs, and I had described that there was a mural on the wall about 10 feet ahead of the stairs, the base of the stairs. There's a giant pile of leaves that seemed to have coalesced from lots of wind blowing leaves in. And that it was basically like a T intersection just ahead of the base of the stairs. So I apparently, did not telegraph myself too much because of the fact that the thief was like, okay, well, I'm going to check out the mural. Well, to check out the mural, you have to step on the pile of leaves. And on the pile of leaves are some snakes, quite a few snakes. So I rolled up how many snakes, and I got 5. And so these are all venomous snakes. They were all agitated, so it's just surprise roll. And he was surprised, so they get to go first. And so I roll 5 attacks, and not a one of them hit AC 15. I hit a 14, but not a 15. And this motherfucker just just happened to have a lot of armor class from dexterity bonus. So all 5 were misses, and everybody was just like, oh my God, so that was how everything started off. And I think at that point, the players realized, holy shit, we really have to be careful, because, the subtext that may not be said is that each bite does damage, right? And these characters typically have between 1 and 8 hit points. 8 if they're really, really lucky, but usually not 8. And if they're fighters, rather. So obviously the damage can kill you, but not just that. If you do get bitten by a venomous snake, you need to make a saving throw that you probably have a 60+% chance of failing. Probably closer to 70 or even 80. 70, we'll say 70. So incredibly likely that you're going to die of a venomous bite. And there were 5 opportunities right at the beginning for this to happen. And, just so y'all know, the rolls are all in Avray, in Discord. So public dice spot, we can all see the rolls. The only rolls that I do privately are things regarding, thief skills that are, like move silently and stuff like that. Stuff where you don't need to know how successful they are because it might affect what you do after rolling. So, pretty much that, and just also, but actually, I think that was pretty much it. That's pretty much only in HP rolls, obviously. But so the after that, they start exploring, and one of the players was incredibly prepared. This is somebody that I play with very often, but he hadn't really experienced, I would say, a dungeon that I had created very meticulously for the purposes of being very punishing and also very depending on mapping. Honestly, I don't know that I had ever made a dungeon that depended this much on mapping, as far as, trying to get the maximum benefit out of it. Well, so he really was paying attention. So he had several hirelings, basically as many as he could get. So he had a lot of meat shields. And the group, after that whole debacle with the snakes, was very, very cautious for a long time. They went through the process of accidentally animating some skeletons by removing some gemstones from their eye sockets. But when handling the skeletons, they often employed, and even with the group of snakes, they employed oil flasks and fire. And I told them ahead of time, I said, look, I'm not going to just let you ready and throw and light an oil flask all in one round. It doesn't make sense to me. You need to have them prepared, with a wick and all that kind of stuff. You need to have a way to light it already prepared. or else that's going to take an action. So all these things are going to feed into each other. You should really have this prepared ahead of time. They had it prepared and they were ready to use it. So the snakes were primarily bashed and burned. The skeletons also were primarily bashed and burned. There's a lot of turning. They had 2 clerics at the party, and they had to use them constantly because of the fact that this tomb was full of these wisps that would fly around and possess people. And at one point, possessed a retainer, and the retainer was close to slitting his own throat, but they managed to restrain him. So everybody I feel like it was a very tense game. But what they did was they managed to, even though they couldn't read the murals with the inscriptions, they couldn't read the inscriptions on the murals, they kind of were able to understand roughly what was going on. There's still a lot that they don't quite get yet because nobody could read this particular language. And it was important to me that there are things like this. There are things that a group just can't do yet. Maybe they need to, find out what language it's in, go back and then get somebody who can do that language and show it to them. If they can get like a rubbing of it, or take them to the place, hire them. I want this to be like kind of like an ongoing endeavor, really. And so, they couldn't read the inscriptions, but they were able to understand some things. And then the rest they were able to pick up from various clues. So one of the murals that was on one of the walls, and I had basically created the first level of the dungeon to be incredibly symmetrical in every way, except for the fact that there is one door that does not match. Like it doesn't have an equal on the opposing side, but on that opposing side, there's a mural. So the guy who's mapping is like, there's probably a secret door here. I'm pretty sure there's a secret door here. And alas, the mural had some reliefs in it where the characters, put in the gemstones that they had retrieved. The relief activated a secret door in the wall that went into the ground. And so, they had to give up their hard-earned jewels in order to access this greater room where there was a mummified corpse sitting on a slab, and it had this very incredible sword in its grasp, along with tons of treasure and also some scrolls and stuff like that. So. Immediately they were like, okay, everything that we fucked with in this place has come to life, and in this case they were damn certain this mummy was going to come to life, but they really wanted the sword and they really wanted the treasure. So first they shuffled the treasure around, so that they could make sure that they could retrieve it before anything goes wrong, and get it out of the way. And they basically burned the mummy corpse. And as they lit the wick, the wick, as they lit the wick, I'm continuously doing these, wandering monster checks and things like that, but they all are, dependent on what's on the floor. If you kill something that is a wandering monster, then it is taken off the floor. So, I'm really leaning into an ecology and all these kinds of things. So, they turn around because they see this pale green light behind them, and they notice that these wisps are just watching them. And this could tell them a whole bunch of different things. It could tell them that, they're like fuck around and find out kind of thing, where they're like, are you about to torch our buddy here? Or is it that they're interested in seeing this happen? For one reason or another, they're not acting yet. And so the players were like, fuck it, torch the thing. So they torched the mummy. After moving all of the good shit out of the way, they couldn't retrieve the sword. Fortunately for them, the sword was magical. So they burn the mummy away. They retrieve the magical sword. It is the first and definitely not the last magical weapon that's going to be retrieved in the campaign. And there was a bit of time where people were like, okay, well, who gets it? And I had no choice but to say, okay, who can use it? This is something that we had to go through because of the fact that everyone kind of wants a magic sword and only one person can have it, and you don't have regular groups. So this isn't something that is a problem that I've encountered in most of my games before, but this is a public game. This is different. And who wouldn't want to have the first magic item that's been found in this whole game? And as far as they know, it's a big score. It is the one from this particular crypt that other people can visit, but they don't have that sword. So basically, I said, who can use it? And as we went through the list, there's really only one person who can use it. So it was inherited by Tali, who is a fighter, and so hopefully Tali continues to play. Basically, the ruling I made was that if you have a magic weapon or a magic magic sword specifically, because magic swords, in Appendix N, they're a big fucking deal, and I want to do no less with that. So if a player just drops off the face of the earth, then eventually the magic sword will it will not repopulate in the world or anything like that, but it will go up for auction or something like that. Something where people have the opportunity to get this thing. So that was how that transpired, and then they finally worked their way to the second floor. So the second floor is really just a stairwell that has a very short gap before a rusted iron door. And you can't really see beyond the rusted iron door. So this was where things got pretty interesting. So basically, the thief... No, it wasn't the thief. This time it was the dwarf. But I had misunderstood. I thought it was the thief because the players have kind of like a similar voice. Anyway, so the dwarf steps forward and says, I want to listen at this door. And so, I gave him the roll and everything. So he's sitting there listening at the door. But one of the things that he doesn't know is that, because, he didn't really inspect it very closely, is that the ground beneath him had been cracked. And so it breaks away. The dwarf falls down a long way, but I reassure him, you don't suffer any falling damage because you do land in this big thing of water. Now, if it had been enough distance, I would have been like, yeah, I mean, even falling in this water, you're going to suffer some kind of damage just because, it's a blunt impact when you land or whatever. And it hurts. But in this case, it was, maybe about 20, 30 feet, something like that. And so he lands in this water, right? And I tell him that the water is kind of like pulling him downward, but not in a whirlpool. There's no whirlpool. It's just the water seems to just have its own sense of gravity. That's a fly. Go away, shoo, fly. It has its own kind of sense of gravity. He's being pulled in, and as he fell into the water, he disturbed some sea serpents. And again, so I rolled to see how many would have been in that spot. I got 3. I rolled the attacks, all 3 hits. And so you have this dwarf who has to make 3 poison saves, and 1 failure is death. And he takes 1 damage from each bite. So 3 HP of damage, 3 poison saves, and he only has 2 HP left after the bites. He passes all 3 poison saves. Statistically, not that improbable because the dwarf has a stronger resistance to poison. But everybody was just like, oh my God, he's going to die. He's so fucking dead. So somebody quickly grabs rope, gets some rope down. He climbs out of the water. I had him do a strength check because of the fact that it does have its own gravity and he's just kind of being pulled in. He succeeded on the strength check. The rope came down. He pulled himself out. They found a way to, get that door down so that they could continue on and then they use the door as a bridge to cover the new gap. So it was pretty interesting. One quick addendum I completely forgot to mention during the first recording. So this kind of, I was leading up to it and then I completely forgot about it. And I'm glad that I watched it to double check. So the character Joe, and in this game, players matter more than characters, honestly. But so Joe, the player, whenever they went down and knocked down the iron door, after that happened, he was basically like, all right, so my hirelings and I, we're all going to be scouring the sides, the walls in this this corridor to try and look for switches or anything like that. And here's why that's interesting. Why that's interesting is because of the fact that if you recall, what I said was the wall with the jewels in the mural went into the ground, and he mapped out where that would have been. And because of that, he was able to find the secret switch in the wall that basically lowered this wall and let him go up to that mural yet again, retrieve the jewels. And so he was able to get more money. And this is just more of an example of how cool it is whenever you have players that are and dungeons that are like designed around the idea that mapping matters, that you're able to find things that are very specific, that you know where something is because of the fact that you are constructing it. And whenever I talked to him afterwards, he said that he wasn't really expecting to be mapping that well, because otherwise he would have used his paper specific for it, and so he had to just kind of use what was available. But he was still able to to figure it out, and because of that, the rest of the group, including him, they were richer, not insignificantly richer. So yeah, that's just something I thought I would add in just because I think it's really cool. So then they get down to the next floor, and they decided to call it a day because, I was like, there's like a ton of like feces and chewed up bones and things like that strewn about on the floor. And some of the players were saying, yeah, I kind of need to get going. And I was like, yeah, it's getting kind of late. We had been playing for a while, but so, they're like, all right, so we're going to leave from here. So they take their earnings, they leave, they get a good amount of XP. It was a great session and, very, very, very tense. Now, the next one though. So, same week, Wednesday, different players, different location. Because I have a map and, I basically have the sites labeled alphabetically. And, you can just say, we want to go check out this site, so, and as time passes, you get some rumors about what people have heard or seen about this location. So they want to go to site site A. So site A is a fort on a hill close to a nearby village. And basically, this one actually has a reward. So a farmer was murdered. A bunch of livestock were stolen. And people say, we'll give 10 gold pieces each for the heads of those responsible. So we have a group that ventures out there. And so they get up to the fort. Basically, the outer walls are ruined. They've kind of dilapidated and fallen into misuse. There's just kind of stone all over the place. But the actual structure, the main building, is still completely intact. It stretches up about 50 feet tall. It has this large gate, or not gate, but this large door in the front. And so the first thing that they want to do is very carefully check out that front door. So they're checking it out. Somebody says that they want to listen at the door. It is a thief, so they have a 2 in 6 chance of hearing a noise. I rolled it. And I rolled it because if you don't hear it, but that you don't hear it because you rolled poorly, then you're like, well, I didn't hear anything. So it's one of those things where I would prefer if if I know whether or not you would have heard the thing. So I did the roll, and it was a success. And so he was able to hear above him some movement. So there was some movement above him, and he hears there's some shuffling. So he looks up and he sees that there is a gap. Like basically there's a balcony, almost it looks like, that is directly above the door, and then that there is a gap all the way across where there's just like maybe a about 6 inches worth of a gap. And one of the players was like, dude, fucking move, because they're going to pour hot oil on you or something. Little bastards, they knew what I was up to. So they decided, fuck that, we're not going through that entrance, which isn't a poor thing, They kind of mulled over just climbing up and, like letting down a rope for others to work their way up to the top of the structure. But it was decided against, so they did not try that. But they went around, looked a little bit more. They found a sewer entrance. So they went through the sewer entrance, and everything was boarded up on the outside. So they worked their way up to one of the sections. They listen. They hear some people doing things, some creatures, language they don't understand. And so they listen at it, and they tear off the boards very quickly and take some shots. They were able to, break some more off, and, using a crowbar and all this kind of stuff, and then charge through, and then, slaughter some drow, as it turns out. So they slaughter some drow, and they're like, cool. So this is a bunch of drow that are doing this. So that's interesting. So, they decapitate them. They're like, we got 3 heads. That's great. Let's go check out some more. Somebody talks about going deeper, because basically there's stairs down and there's stairs up. They decide against stairs down. They're using the assumption that if you go deeper, it's worse. Not an ill-advised way to look at things. So they ascend, and once they get to the top of the stairs, there is a trap door. So they, try and figure out, make sure there's no traps or anything like that. And that's all good. And they try and open the door, and it is barred on the other side. So they kind of like work their magic and, break the bar and bust it open. And they are staring several kobolds in the face, who are holding these wriggling giant insects that start mauling, like attacking them. And so there is this long pitched battle where, some of these insects were killed. Actually, not all the insects, but some of the player characters, they start climbing out and attacking these kobolds. But several of the kobolds retreated, and so what was just left were these insects, and the players keep fighting on. Next thing they know, kobolds are just swarming into this place, and it's starting to get ugly. There's just shots that are ringing out. The fighting just keeps going. Eventually one of the player characters kind of like charged into another room to attack the kobolds, and did get a kill, but then directly after was stabbed twice in a row by 2 kobolds, and just immediately killed. There are no safety nets in this. You get to 0 HP, you're dead. It's just over for you. So that was the first PC death in the public game so far. They retreat, and it was kind of hairy, because they were trying to retrieve the body, but I was, giving them ability checks to see if they're able to, how quickly they're able to pull this body down with them, because they want to retrieve his goods and bury him, whatever. And they didn't do such a great job, so they suffered some more attacks, but the attacks didn't hit. They pulled the body down, as far as I can recall. And then the kobolds just, close the door and then move some stuff on top of it. And so it was completely unsuccessful. All that they had were some kills, and I am doing 100 XP per hit die, so it's not as though you don't get anything for kills. Like there are XP values in OSE, but I just like being able to just tally up hit die and give it out and be done with it. It's a little bit generous on the front end, but on the latter end, it's not so generous. But the only valuables that were retrieved is they happened to grab some kobold eggs, I gave like 30 GP for each of those because they're not like invaluable. It's probably not the right term. They don't lack value, I should say, and they can be treasure in the right eyes. But so they leave. One of the players has to drop off at that point. The rest of them want to regroup and then try again. So the player that lost his cleric re-rolls, brings his new character in. They decide that they want to try one of the many holes that are surrounding the keep. And I describe them as pretty wide, where they can just walk into, basically. And what they decided to do was take some time to find boulders to cover up the holes. And before they pushed the boulders to cover up the hole exits, they wanted to throw some fire flasks in. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. If y'all want to do that, you're going to take some time to do that. You're going to use some of your resources, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to see what happens. So they do that. And then they say, well, we're going to wait and see what happens, So I was like, all right, well, you wait for a little while. And I rolled my Wandering Monster check. So what they don't know, and I can't reveal too much, but what they don't know is that there is a large monster in the vicinity. I happened to roll it up. There's a 1 in 6 chance, whenever they were doing this, that it would roll up. It rolled up. So it burrows out. It paralyzes all of each of them. And, so it uses attack rolls. So it's not automatic. It uses attack rolls and then it uses saving throws. But they were all three paralyzed and for a long time, long enough for it to take them back to its lair and devour them. So 3 more deaths. And that is basically where they called it. So it's just pretty remarkable, just how different things can go when luck is on your side, whenever you have proper planning, when you're really just doing the right things. There was some information that they were lacking, that they were going ahead on with the Wednesday group. That the Monday group was a little bit more tedious, perhaps I would say. And, it pays off. It really does pay off. And, just the massive preparedness. So all in all, I love this game. I love Old School Essentials. I love the way that everything the players do matters so much. And, they're whenever you do have to pull the dice out, they matter so much. There's so many times in 5th edition, whenever you play, that a single die roll it doesn't boil down to a single die roll that often. I've had those moments come up, and they are probably 1 in, 10, 20 sessions maybe. Usually there's just so many safety nets that fall behind everything that you're gonna usually be fine. This paralysis, for instance, in 5th edition, you would have had a saving throw at the end of your turns to try and reverse it. People would have tons of resources available to get rid of it if they prepared light restoration or whatever. But it's really not a big deal to begin with. Even if you fall to 0, so the guy that was stabbed to death, he would have had death saving throws. People have had the opportunity to try and retrieve him. Moldvay and OSE by extension just say, fuck you. It's just going to happen. It's going to be one die roll to figure it out. And God damn it, I love it. I just fucking love it. And I wish that I had that I were experiencing it from the player angle, which is not something that I often say, really, because I love DMing. I love it. It's my favorite. But in this case, like, it's a game where really I'm kind of I just, Old School Essentials as a player sounds really, really fun. So now, am I going to act on that and try and join a group? Probably not, because I just don't have a lot of time. So that is how it's going. We're going back into Site F, which is the tomb, tomorrow. And then they're going back into Site A, which is the fort, on Wednesday. And we'll see how it goes. And I'll let you all know how it goes. But long story short, Old School Essentials is fucking awesome. BX and its derivatives are fucking awesome. Just, highly recommend. As long as you don't mind having to roll up characters fairly frequently, then, it's all it's all in there. And just as a side note, I also did a DCC funnel, and I came to the realization that a level 0 DCC character is basically about as fragile as a level 1 magic user in Old School Essentials, except for they don't have a spell. So there is as fragile as a level 1 magic user that has already used up their one spell. So that realization was pretty fun to come across, because people often talk about how crazy deadly DCC funnels are, and it's like, yeah, welcome to being a magic user in BX. So that's it for today. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. I know it's been kind of long. I haven't been doing a whole lot of long videos, but I just wanted to talk about the game just because it's a lot. It's just a blast. So shout out to the players. Joe and his mini hirelings did a phenomenal job. There were just a lot of really cool players in that game. So in all of them. So y'all take care. Have a great weekend. I'm not feeling 100%, so I might not be doing a whole lot of videos. But I've been hanging in there. I think it's just really bad allergies, honestly. And I started a diet again, so we'll see how that goes. Peace out, everybody.